We're now with transportation licensing, and if you could introduce yourself, tell us how your year was and what your budget thoughts are.
All right, sir. I'm Brian McQuiston, Director of the Transportation Licensing Commission. As you know, the Commission regulates wreckers, taxis, horse-drawn carriages, other passenger vehicles for hire, and booting services. Our mission is public safety related, ensuring that companies have appropriate liability insurance, that drivers are screened with background checks, that vehicles carrying passengers are mechanically and structurally sound, and that companies and drivers operate within the specific laws for their industries. Last year we processed a record 1,650 applications for licenses and permits. That's a 42% increase over the previous year, which is also a record. So I think the majority of that came from the startup on the non-taxi passengers vehicles for hire. 1 out of every 50 of those applicants, however, was screened out as ineligible or disqualified. So we count that as a plus. We're doing our job to make sure that everybody's screened. It's important that we have a healthy and effective transportation system that includes taxis, liveries, and shuttles, and that each part of that system operates within its own specialized area. So last year the Commission began licensing the non-taxi passenger vehicles for hire. As of the beginning of this month, we had licensed and permitted about 60 companies and over 400 drivers. There are still a number of operators who have not become licensed, and we're increasing our enforcement efforts to encourage them to come under regulation. We're on track with this year's budget for expenses, and we're ahead on revenues. We will exceed the projections for revenues. We've submitted a budget to meet the 2% reduction target goal, and I believe we can continue to operate as we are today with those reductions.
Okay.
There's been a good deal of interest and opinion expressed concerning the question of whether we will have enough taxi cabs to meet the anticipated demand when the new convention center opens in 2013. In December, our Commission conditionally approved 88 additional taxi cab permits. And I was asked to determine what resources would be needed to manage those additional vehicles and whether additional revenues could offset any additional expenses. Independent of that question, how to manage more taxi cabs, we've also been looking for some time now at how to address one of our long-standing priority issues, which is how to improve the condition of taxi cab vehicles in general. I'd like to introduce Helen Rogers, our chair.
Good to see you. Thanks for being here. We're early, so you're not late.
I understand.
Back to the condition of vehicles. During our annual inspection last year, less than half of 589 taxis that were inspected passed their initial inspection, and that's an announced inspection. And 17 were required to be taken out of service altogether. The day-to-day condition of taxis is a continuing concern for us, and it will be even more so when we get a new convention center here. To address both of those issues, adding more vehicles and also, whether that's this year or in the future at any time, and improving the condition of the vehicles on the street, we are looking at two different approaches and the resources that might be needed for each. The first approach, which can only address part of the vehicle condition question, is to focus on regulation. Setting higher standards in the ordinance and in the Commission rules for the vehicles. Examples would be lower the mandatory retirement age of taxis, or require that any vehicle damaged in an accident, even in a little accident, be removed from service until it can be repaired and re-inspected. And none of those are required right now. Such regulatory steps can have a positive impact and would not require any budget allocations. The second approach, which could be in addition to those, responds to both issues, how to manage more cabs and also how to make sure that the cabs we have are in better shape. This does have a budget impact and would entail adding another inspector position. It would enable us to double the number of formal inspections that we do now and to patrol more hours, allowing us to do more spot inspections. It would also enable us to handle more taxi cabs, so it meets that need also. We have therefore submitted another budget modification for improvement, adding an additional taxi cab inspector position and an accompanying capital operating request to purchase the necessary vehicle and radios. The impact on our operating budget would be an increase of about $61,800 in expenses. And with the help of the Finance Department, we've been looking at how we might offset that with revenues from having more taxi cabs. But even with those revenues from permitting more cabs, there'll still be a shortfall of $39,400 to fully offset all those costs through our permits. As you know, there's a study underway that's going to provide an assessment of the taxi cab industry and also our regulation of it, and that won't be completed until I understand about the beginning of May. The last time the Metro government did a study on the taxi cabs was in 1996, and that report was invaluable. It produced a number of improvements. It actually established the way we would operate the commission apart from the Metro Clerk's office at that time. And so we're looking at this study, providing the same kind of recommendations, and it's even more comprehensive in that it will also look at the non-taxi sector, which the last one did not do. So that would be very helpful, and we'll look for their comments and recommendations.
Well, that study give or comment on how many taxis we need with the new convention center? Or?
Yeah, I think it's designed to do, that's part of what it's going to do. Brian,
Yes, sir. Yeah, I know that's one of the aspects that is covered in it. That was our key question, is, how many do we need? And some cities have formulas based on population and airport trips and hotel occupancy. We look at all those things, but we don't have a formula. There's really only maybe 3 or 4 cities that do, and I've talked to them, and some of them are not. They're always tinkering with it. So I think those things are probably a bit away, but maybe this study will help us to focus on some other areas that we've not looked at.
I think, Mayor, the intent there was try to get a fresh set of eyes from some people that have seen it other places, recognizing that if the industry is not changing today, which arguably it is, it's going to be evolving and changing over the next couple of years as a result of what's happening around town, and just trying to bring some best practices to the table and kind of how we move forward and what the best template or frame around it, what it looks like, make some recommendations on some changes we can make or whatever. The scope's pretty broad, and also to address this issue of the non-taxi services too.
Yeah, and I think that was as important because there's a lot of different interests that have proposed legislation that it's one does one does the other, and no one really knows what they all do together, and this I think to look at comprehensively.
And we think we'll get that back by early May?
Yeah, I think early May.
It was a 90-day. That was 90 days, and I think it runs about to the 1st of May.
Yeah. I mean, give or take, I'd say by the middle of May we'll probably have it. I don't think we'll have any time to make any recommendations in the budget we submit to the council on May 1st. But it's the course of the budget. It's in the hands of the council. If there's any budgetary impact, we can address that as we finalize with the council.
Okay. One other thing that might be considered if an additional inspector is needed is the timing of adding that inspector. The numbers I gave you and that I put in my budget modification are a full year. And with the convention center really not coming on board until spring, we may not need that position as early as a full year's worth of expense on that person.
Okay. Good. Any other questions?
Nope.
Rich? Good. Thank you. Thoughtful report.